Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We still have quite a few people joining us, so we're going to give it just a minute and then we'll get started. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the Save Cruelty-Free Cosmetics webinar. I'm Kathy Guillermo. I'm the Senior Vice President for PETA's Laboratory Investigations Department, and I'll be moderating this webinar today. I am joined by Dr. Julia Baines, Science Policy Manager for PETA UK, who has been co-leading projects related to cosmetics testing in the EU. Dr. Julia Fenton, Vice President of Unilever's Safety and Environmental Assurance Center, who has long made the case for product safety without the use of animals. Firdaus El-Hansali, Dove's Global Vice President, who has championed the brand's positive communication and moral actions. And Gemma Shaw, Senior Communications Manager for Beauty and Personal Care at Unilever, and a wonderful ambassador for bringing organizations together in support of upholding the cosmetics animal testing ban. Just a couple of things to get out of the way. Today's webinar will be recorded, and the link for viewing and sharing will be forwarded to you all after the event. There will be time for questions to all speakers at the end of the presentation. Everyone's on mute right now, but you may type any questions you have in the questions section of the GoToWebinar toolbox, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen. If you send in a question or a comment, please indicate if it's for a specific speaker or for everyone. And we will also have on hand Amanda Nordstrom, Company Liaison for Beauty Without Bunnies at PETA, who will help answer and moderate questions throughout the event. I will now hand over to our first speaker, Dr. Julia Baines.
Thank you, Kathy. As many of you will be well aware, of course, the EU Cosmetics Regulation is a legislative act that established a really important precedent worldwide for assessing the human health risks of cosmetic products and ingredients without relying on animal test data generated after a series of now famous prohibitions on animal testing were enacted. Yet we find ourselves in a position today where cosmetics ingredients continue to be tested on thousands of animals for the purpose of the EU REACH chemicals regulation. So I'm talking to you today to ask for your help in ensuring a future where cosmetics animal testing ban is fully implemented as originally intended and all animal tests are replaced by humane non-animal methods. But first, let me just provide you with a brief bit of history and context to explain our current position. So as many of you I'm sure will be aware, in 2013, with the full implementation of the cosmetics animal testing and marketing bans, it was envisioned then that we were really witnessing the end to animal suffering for cosmetics sold in the EU. But sadly, this has not been the case. And this is because the administration of the EU REACH chemicals regulation by the European Chemicals Agency, otherwise known as ECHA, is seemingly in conflict with responsibilities to avoid animal testing under the cosmetics regulation. So REACH, which stands for the Registration, Evaluation, Authorization and Restriction of Chemicals Regulation, requires chemical companies to provide information on the human health effects and environmental hazards of almost every chemical that's used in Europe. And depending on the tonnage that's produced each year, REACH demands the results from a defined list of tests. And if companies don't already have these results, then they're often required to conduct new tests, often requiring large numbers of animals. Now in 2014, so just 1 year after the implementation of the cosmetics regulation, ECHA and the Commission issued a joint statement signifying that substances used exclusively in cosmetics may be tested on animals for the assessment of workforce exposure during the manufacturing process. And then for substances in cosmetics and other types of products, tests on animals are permitted regardless of any kind of worker exposure risk. So as a result, the intent of the cosmetics regulation in ensuring that cosmetics products can reach the market without new tests on animals, well, we feel that's been completely and utterly undermined. So in response, in 2015, PETA entities in Europe kicked off a campaign to uphold the cosmetics testing ban. We've taken part in demos, meeting with policymakers, regulatory authorities, going as far even as filing a complaint with the EU Ombudsman and supporting companies in appealing against these testing requirements when they come from ECHA. But so far, the European Commission and ECHA have strongly retained their position. We've been unable to budge them, unfortunately. Although in 2018, we did have some good news because we've also seen that ending cosmetics tests on animals does remain a really incredibly important priority for the European Parliament. And that was with regard to the global ban resolution that they passed. So as part of this resolution, members of Parliament called for the cosmetics regulation to be used as a model for achieving a worldwide animal testing and marketing ban for cosmetics. So it's really great to still know that we've got their support in this. Unfortunately, last year though, in 2020, that saw the culmination of 2 ECHA Board of Appeal cases, which you might have heard about. This was involving a company called Symrise, which is a German ingredient supplier, and they were contesting the way in which REACH was being used to circumvent the animal testing ban. Now, the testing decisions from ECHA, which were requiring 2 exclusive use cosmetics ingredients to be tested on rats, rabbits and fish, was sadly upheld. And now Symrise is at the point, with the support of the PETA Science Consortium International and other interveners, has taken its case to the EU Court of Justice. And so many of these actions have culminated in the major European animal protection organisations, including PETA, Cruelty-free Europe, the European Coalition to End Animal Experiments, Eurogroup for Animals and Humane Society International Europe, all coming together to launch the Save Cruelty-free European Citizens Initiative. Now, just to give you a little bit of context on what an ECI actually is, it's a mechanism by which EU nationals can call on the European Commission to propose new legislation. But unlike a normal kind of petition, an ECI actually addresses the Commission directly, and it kickstarts a legally defined process that can result in changes to the law. So the Commission are required to listen to an ECI, and there's certain processes then that has to be followed as a result. So it's not like a normal petition that could be kicked around, but not a lot often happens. This is very different to that. But for the Commission to actually consider the ECI, we need to first gain at least 1 million verified signatures, with a minimum threshold count met in at least 7 different countries. So this is by no means any small feat. So where are we now, and what's the impact on brands outside of the EU? Well, we can't afford to wait for the result of an EU court case to decide the fate of the cruelty-free cosmetics industry. And this is partly because the European Commission recently published its chemical strategy for sustainability. And this strategy presents their new long-term vision for the EU chemicals policy. And whilst it aims to achieve a very worthy goal in safe and sustainable use of chemicals, the strategy itself actually presents a number of serious concerns that could lead to a massive increase in animal testing requirements. And as part of that strategy roadmap, the cosmetics regulation is actually set to be open for amendment in 2022. And this is a time in which significant regulatory changes may actually be introduced into the regulation. And of course, we also need to remember that the impact of REACH can stretch way beyond just the EU. And this is because the test requirements are set for all imported substances that come into the EU, but of course, those substances are used and marketed globally. So this means we need to act urgently to make sure that the European Commission and ECHA's interpretation of the cosmetics animal testing ban is challenged, and to prevent the introduction of new animal test requirements. Now, so far, over 270,000 signatures have been gained for the ECI, which is absolutely fantastic in the short period that we've launched. And 3 countries have already met their minimum threshold figure, but we're still only just over a quarter of the way there. So we've got a long way to go. So I'm now going to pass you over to Julia Fenton, who will tell you a lot more about some of the ingredients subject to each test requirements. Julia.
Thank you, Julia, and hello everyone. It's a pleasure to join you today for this important webcast. I just thought I'd share a little bit of context for Unilever's involvement and why I, for example, as a product safety specialist and a toxicologist, is involved. So Unilever's been on a bit of a journey over the last 3 years when we changed our corporate facing animal testing policy to a policy and position that was brand led. So our brands then had the opportunity to draw on our animal-free safety science, which is the team that I work with and lead in Unilever. So that meant direct docking from a scientific point of view with our brands. And those brands can be the big household names like Dove or Tresemme, but also we have many smaller brands, some that we've acquired, some that came with making cruelty-free claims already, and we now have 29 Unilever brands that are listed by PETA. And so obviously we have quite a lot of skin in the game here in terms of the challenges that we're facing. We also collaborate actively with PETA and other animal protection organisations around publicly supporting global animal testing ban on cosmetics, and we've done that since the middle of 2018. And so on the basis of that and the experience that we've got, what I would just like to do is spend a bit of time just taking you through some of the background and why actually it's a big challenge for all of us and why we need to lean into this and work together in terms of how we try to take it forward. So what we've got on the Unilever corporate website, you can see there is this Save Cruelty-Free Cosmetics call to action. Which is a little bit unique, I suspect, for Unilever to get more into that sort of activist mode. But that's really, I would say, because Unilever's CEO, Alan Jope, was the person who drove the change in terms of how we approach no animal testing. And he personally is pushing us quite hard to work and collaborate with others in terms of trying to crack this big challenge. So next chart, please, Julia. Are we able to move to the next one? Thank you. So Julia's already mentioned about the Simrise UV filters, and we first became aware of that, over a year ago now, and have been sort of working in the background to sort of understand the specifics of that case and to join with others in terms of how we can intervene in the pending court case. So those are 2 materials where testing has not been done because the company has stood up and challenged the request of the EU regulators. But what has subsequently become clear more recently in an analysis done by the Centre for the Alternatives to Animal Testing and others, published in August this year, is that since those EU cosmetic testing bans were introduced, there have been 63 ingredients that are used in cosmetics where more animal testing has been done. So that just exemplifies what Julia was saying around the fact that whilst we think we've got animal testing bans under the cosmetics regulation in the EU, actually there is animal testing happening supposedly for protecting workers. And then we've done a bit more digging, which is around the fact that the Chemicals Agency in Europe is doing compliance checks of dossiers, some of which are 10 years old, submitted very early on when the agency was first established. And what we're finding is there's over 100 other ingredients that are used in cosmetics where animal testing is being requested. And then Julia also mentioned that there are new requirements coming through under the chemical strategy for sustainability. So, it don't feel that this is a helpless case, but it is something now that we're starting to understand, we all need to try to work together in terms of how we're going to best manage this. So my last chart, please, Julia. Just wanted to flag just some examples of the ingredients that we're talking about. The reason being is they're just so widely used and we're so dependent on them. So things like titanium dioxide, which is another ingredient that quite often is used as a UV filter, a sunscreen, or can be used, for example, to make the formulations more opaque. Then the sodium benzoate, which is a commonly used preservative. And then there's 3 very widely used surfactants. They're used across a whole range of consumer product formulations. And so you can see there, just if we take the SLES example, that's 2,362 animals across rats, rabbits, and fish, where testing is being requested. And you can just see then in the other chart the exposure of a whole number of cruelty-free brands across just those 5 ingredients. So we're talking about thousands of brands where we all want to maintain the cruelty-free status, and yet these ingredients are on lists requiring new animal testing. So it's a difficult position. It's one where I feel we need to fight this together. For the last 12 months, Peter and others have been doing a lot of hard work, but it's time now that we need others to join us and to help us. It's unprecedented in as much as this week, actually, I've been working 30 years in the animal protection area. And it's the first time that all of the big global animal protection organizations and many brands have started to join together. So you can see how important it is to many of us. And I will now hand over to Fedaus, who'll talk it from a brand perspective.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Julia. Thank you for having me today. I'm here to talk a little bit about what we've been doing on Dove and with the Body Shop, and obviously with PETA and Cruelty-Free International, Cruelty-Free Europe. So I would like to take you through what we've done and why this is absolutely critical. So why actually Dove joined forces to save cruelty-free cosmetics? I think for brands today, we really need to take a stand. We have a role to play in solving issues that our societies are facing, and this is one of those big issues. So brands need to bring their voices together with the animal rights protection NGOs to drive really the change. And I think this is really a key moment for us as brands to take action. So what happened really is that on the 2nd of December 2020, like many of you, Dove came out and signed the PETA's open letter to a European Commission, Parliament and Council. And I think that was, that was really the first step. And there were a few other steps that we needed to take very quickly after that. So if we can move to the next chart, what we've done is following up, we've joined forces with the Body Shop and PETA and Cruelty-Free Europe, Human Society International, Eurogroup for Animals, and the European Coalition to End Animal Experiments, as well as over 100 animal protection organizations, to sound a rallying call for EU citizens all over the world to take action and help us end cosmetics animal testing in Europe. We've even actually gone further and taken this to the streets with our message on safe cruelty-free cosmetics, and I will show you that in a second. But brands here, you see Dove and the Body Shop coming together because we have a common cause, and this is really important. Our voice needs to be heard, and the European citizens need to see brands taking action. So if we move to the next chart, what we've done is we launched a campaign on the 31st of August in Paris. And the way we've done that is actually by creating a guerrilla marketing activity, so bringing it really to the streets. We partnered with a fantastic muralist and painter called Nina Valkov. She has such a passion for, and such a strong love for the planet and for animals. So she actually brought this in a very simple way to life to the EU citizens, to really act as a wake-up call to say, there is a way in which you can support this. Please sign the ECI. And I think that was a really strong way to make it happen. But that was the first, the first step of this campaign. Then we took it, if we go to the next slide, we took it actually to other cities in Europe to carry on this wake-up call and carry on bringing this message very close to the European citizens, so that they really see that there is a need for them to sign this ECI. So the ambition was to invite the citizens to sign the ECI. It's really critical that as brands we do this work together with PETA and Cruelty-free Europe and all the animal rights protection organizations, because we have strong audiences out there. People buy our products, people follow us because they love our brands. It's really critical that we add our voice and support this ECI. So that's really what I wanted to share with you. But actually, what I think is really interesting is also to understand like the impacts we can have as a brand by bringing our consumers all together, our audiences all together, and help them understand that there is a need to sign the ECI. But beyond that, it also does something to your brand, and I think it's really important that we talk about that. So if we go to the next to the next slide. You can see that actually it did spark a movement. It sparked a movement, and we had loads of coverage talking about this movement that the partners were trying to bring through the Safe Cruelty-Free Cosmetics campaign. So it really drove attention, so that we can carry on our mission, which is giving it a maximum awareness, so that European citizens know that they can do something about it. If we go to the next slide. Yeah, so you can see obviously quite a few headlines across Europe, from Spain to France to Italy to the Netherlands, Germany. Everyone has been really involved and putting a lot of energy to get these conversations happening and this coverage happening, so that the European citizens are aware. And even our influencers joined forces with us. And I think we have another slide where we can see that the influencers that we are talking to every single day, that are talking to our consumers and our audiences every day, have actually decided to come and partner on this, really, and show that this is something, this is really a rallying cry. This is something that everyone should be helping to succeed and get us to the level of signatures that we need. And I think if we go actually to the following one, you can see what it has done also in terms of benefits to the brand, not only Dove, but also the Body Shop and all the other brands that have joined the movement. It actually drove 80% earned positive sentiment, over 1 billion earned impressions, and 90% of the sentiment was really positive on social. So it can show actually that, yes, it helps really drive European citizens towards signing the ECI, but also it does something very good to the brand. Consumers and our audiences are wanting to see brands taking action, and this is a way to show them that your brand is really taking thorough action and thinking about being really purposeful. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. And I think now I'm going to hand over to Gemma, who is going to tell you a little bit about what happened with the other brands.
Thank you, Firdaus. Thank you very much. And hello, everybody. Privileged to be joining you today. I've just got a couple of slides I wanted to chat through, because we knew when this campaign was being built that no NGO, no brand could achieve 1 million signatures on its own. It does take collective brand power to make this happen. And as you all know, a toolkit was created to help brands, big or small, activate in whatever way they could. And I would love to have shared everybody's work here, but thank you to everybody who has activated. I really come at this from a cross-brand perspective, working for Unilever. I work with all of our beauty and personal care brands, and I've been really proud to see so many of them activate. So special shout out to all of them on the call today. What we've learned from doing this is the toolkit is working well in terms of creating that unified brand identity. We really have a unique opportunity here to work as a collective across industry with our NGO and animal protection group partners. And never did I imagine that I'd be working on a campaign of this scale with so many important voices and on such an important issue. What we're seeing, if you start to kind of look at these numbers and unpick them a little bit, is there are a few things that work really well. One of them is the identity as a whole, to show that unity. Another is very obviously putting spend behind posts, and I recognize that some brands are in a better position to do that than others, but also simply sharing love for each other's posts, where Dove and Body Shop and PETA and others have joined in and back posts. We've seen higher engagement, which has been really positive. And I also wanted to share a couple of Unilever's posts specifically, where we've taken the toolkit and we've adapted it to make the post look a little bit different. And in the bottom right there, you've got a couple of examples. Unfortunately, in still form, they don't quite do them justice. But the point of showing you this is that there are opportunities to use the toolkit in more creative ways. And again, I recognize some of you are more able to do that than others. It's really important that our posts don't become too samey, because we lose engagement as we do so. So for 2022, we are looking to update this toolkit to give you fresh content on a regular basis and with a bit of a schedule, so you know what's coming up, and allows you to plan a little bit better for the content that we're serving up to you. If we move on to the next slide, I also wanted to recognise the work of the animal protection groups, our NGO partners, who will continue to underpin everything we're doing. And that's so important because it provides air cover to our brands. What we're seeing here is the NGOs, animal protection groups, becoming really quite creative with their use. Yes, they've been using the toolkit, and that's wonderful because it helps to unite all of us. But they've also been creating fresh and engaging content. Now, this obviously depends on budget. So you've got a couple of examples here. In the bottom there, you'll see a still from a video. This was one of the groups in the Czech Republic working with celebrities and showing them some images of what happens when animals are tested on. And without actually showing us what happens, seeing the reactions of the people on the screen is really quite impactful. And what we then saw was an enormous uplift of signatures in the Czech Republic, almost overnight. I think an additional 60,000 signatures came in, and they've absolutely smashed their market's target for the ECI. But then you've got another example, top right there, of one of the groups simply standing in front of some graffiti of the campaign and getting some nice engagement from that as well. We see all of these things working really well. There is room for brands to do more of this, and we can be on hand to have those conversations with you. So lots of opportunity. Lots more coming in 2022, and we're really looking forward to having more of you working on the campaign and doing what you can to activate. That's it from me. I will hand back.
Thanks, Gemma, and thanks everybody. I did want to thank everybody who's watching and participated in this today. If you've already begun this process of taking action, we saw some screenshots of some of those brands. I think that's so important. So as you've heard from our speakers, ECHA and the European Commission's interpretation of the cosmetics and REACH regulations means that companies who are developing and manufacturing cosmetics products are really at risk of indirectly being involved in testing on animals because of the requirements placed on cosmetics ingredient suppliers by ECHA. So as such, REACH really does affect the Beauty Without Bunnies program. Companies have the option, of course, to choose ingredients that have not been tested on animals after the company obtained PETA's accreditation, and can choose not to develop new products if it means that animals have to die for it. If a cosmetics company tests on animals for any reason, or uses ingredients from a supplier that has recently tested those ingredients on animals because of the requirements of REACH or other legislation, this company is at risk of losing its animal test-free status. So to comply with our policy, and because of the particular situation we face in the EU, we ask that companies engage with their suppliers on REACH testing requirements. Where there are risks of animal tests being conducted, scientists with PETA entities can also offer support on non-animal testing approaches or appealing those test requirements. It may become necessary for brands to reformulate a product to eliminate any cosmetics ingredient tested on animals, or to ask suppliers to help them maintain cruelty-free status by contesting ECHA decisions. Now, we certainly recognize that these are short-term solutions, and what we really need is for all of us to come together to address the problem head-on, and we can do that through the ECI. So we thank every one of you who's already supported this campaign so far. It really has not gone unnoticed. And I do want to reassure all the brands listed with the Beauty Without Bunnies program that we are ready to work with you to address any regulatory compliance issues. And PETA entities are determined to ensure that the public's opposition to testing cosmetics on animals is honored. Just one test can use more than 1,000 animals. With more tests on the horizon and policy changes in the works, it's really essential that we come together to support and save cruelty-free citizens initiative. From experience of other ECIs, we know that this is a campaign likely to be won online, and paid social advertising can consume at least 200,000 euros, or in US dollars, about 232,000. Any companies that haven't already activated, we really strongly urge you to use the evergreen posts in the digital toolkit. The link is on the screen, and today's slides will be made available to you. Please use your social media channels to promote the campaign as often as you possibly can, but feel free, as Gemma said, to be as creative as you like with the resources. In 2022, the toolkit will be updated with new posts, and we aim to make it just as simple as we possibly can to continue this drumbeat into next year. For any companies that would like to go all out in support of the ECI, we'd love to work with you to find a key market hook and give you the space to shine. For companies operating only outside Europe, it's important to remember that your supply chains are affected just as much as those of your European counterparts. We recognize that your mailing list may not reach many EU citizens, although EU citizens living outside the EU can still sign the ECI, but you can still help us by donating to PETA to fund our European campaign, and we'll credit you for that as appropriate. So in conclusion, we're asking every one of you to do something, whether that's donating to the campaign or sharing your own material through your own channels, and by engaging with your suppliers. We believe we can, we believe we have to collectively change ECHA test requirements and ensure the ECI reaches its target of 1 million signatures so that future EU legislation works in our favor rather than against us. And I'd just like to add too that as far as our Beauty Without Bunnies list goes, we intend on sharing all information with our supporters and being entirely open about what we're all faced with right now, and including what you as brands are also faced with. So thanks for listening. I'll open this up to the floor for questions now.
So just as a reminder to participants, if you have a question, you can type it into the question box. So we won't be able to unmute you, but we'll certainly be able to see any written questions and then we can respond to them.
We have a question that asks, is the REACH ingredient testing requirement on the supplier level or ingredient level?
I can take that one. It's around the specific ingredients. So what you're probably seeing is when you get into the detail of talking with suppliers, they may actually be part and parcel of consortia who are working together around the testing proposals. Now, what we really want is that they are thinking about how they would fill any information gaps using no animal testing approaches, which is where the PETA scientists and those of us in Unilever and other companies can actually be helpful. So I think if you're faced with some of those where you're finding that suppliers are saying they have no option other than to do the animal testing because that's being required, what we're asking them to do is challenge that within the consortia, and maybe you could also let us, particularly maybe Julia Baines and myself, know so that we can try to help.
Yeah, I would just add to that, thanks Julia, that through the Science Consortium that we do help suppliers and registrants under REACH appeal any test decisions with cosmetics ingredients. We always try to get involved in those particular kind of cases, but there is a time frame under which suppliers have to try and contest any of those decisions. But there's more that suppliers can potentially do in terms of shouting about it. You know, the consideration of going public and talking in the press about the pressures that they are facing and the impact that it can potentially have on you as the downstream users. So that's why we do feel it's very important to just keep the communications open, keep talking, and then try collectively to see what we can actually do about some of these test requirements.
And I might just add, Julia, as a way of explanation, that the consortium that you're talking about is the PETA Science Consortium International, which is all of our scientists from all of the PETA entities around the world.
Thanks very much for those answers. We also have a question. If you could remind everyone of the deadline for the ECI, please.
Yeah, so officially we have 1 year from launch, and we launched on the 31st of August. So we officially have 1 year in which to collect signatures. But in all honesty, because these tests are being requested now, because animals are being used and have been used in tests, we need to be first. The faster, the better. So we are not really focusing on 31st of August next year. We're looking at trying to achieve these 1 million verified signatures as quickly as we possibly can, because the faster we can collect, the quicker we can submit them to the Commission for verification and kickstart this whole process where they will then have to come back and respond. And we also have to keep in mind the policy changes that we're also facing next year with the chemical strategy for sustainability and the opening of the cosmetics regulation. So we're facing a lot of pressure within the industry. So I think acting urgently is really the key here.
Thank you, Julia. We've also had a couple of questions about companies that are in the US and what their right next move is, what they should do next to help.
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one as well, and then others can add. Because REACH can stretch beyond the EU, obviously companies outside of the EU are affected just as much. So US brands, we would still love you to be able to use your social media channels, because we know there's a huge bunch of EU citizens that live within the US and they are eligible to sign the ECI. So it doesn't matter where they live, they can still sign the ECI. And collectively, I think brands coming together internationally, especially knowing the history behind the cosmetics regulation in the EU and the knock-on effects it has had on other legislation worldwide, and the impact it has, it really is held up as the gold standard, if you like. So there's a lot riding on this, I think, internationally.
And
Yeah, and I might add to that, Julia, that we recognise that a lot of the posts that are in the toolkit are very much focused on brands that have a presence in the EU. And we, within Unilever, adapted some of that to make it relevant for all of our brands globally, particularly on World Animal Day. There was something quite powerful in our brands being able to say that they stand with with other cosmetic brands in Europe. There's also, I think it's important to recognise that the UK is obviously in a different place because we're no longer part of the EU. But again, we've been finding ways for our UK brands to activate with a slightly different call to action to ensure that the posts are still relevant and capturing the EU citizens who do live in the UK, but also just bringing attention to the matter as a whole, and hopefully contributing towards the change that we see in the UK as well.
I just want to add, thank you, Gemma, for that. I just want to add, it's important to stay in touch with your suppliers too, I think, and see what kind of pressures they're facing. And please get in touch with us at Beauty Without Bunnies US. If you have any questions, we'll try to help you as much as we possibly can. And in all the years I've been working on this effort, it's always been the companies that have driven change. Consumers communicated to companies and companies made change. And so I think your voice to your suppliers and to the officials in Europe is incredibly important.
Thank you, everyone. We also have a question about where they can find a list of the materials and ingredients that have already been tested on animals under REACH.
So there isn't any details of the specific ingredients or the suppliers of the ingredients that have been published in the article from the Centre for Alternatives to Animal Testing. And I gather that there's no intention to release that list of ingredients at the moment. The way that we have found out information has been through looking at the European Chemicals Agency database. So when I put up those 5 ingredients, they were ones where we were looking at the vulnerability of our brands in relation to making sure that we had effective supplier compliance with the Beauty Without Bunnies requirements. Now, it's a lot of work to go through the European database. I have a feeling that PETA also have probably done their own homework there, and some of the other animal protection organisations have. I think the challenge is not necessarily to link the ingredient and the company that might be, or companies that might be associated with the testing, with your own suppliers. So my first call would be a discussion with the suppliers to find out when you're doing your annual check, to find out whether or not there are any requirements for them in relation to testing. I think that's the most simple way of keeping things within the sphere of your own brand. But Julia, I don't know whether you've got any advice on that one as well.
Yeah, it's not a case that there's a golden list, unfortunately, if you like. It would be lovely if there was, because we do spend a considerable amount of time essentially data mining the REACH substances database, which contains tens and tens of thousands of registered substances. So we are diligently checking when new test requirements might be coming out under the various processes. And it is a case that where we have concerns, then we will look at flagging those with those on our list, so you can help do your checks. But we're also wary that we don't necessarily want to be harshly highlighting a list in public, if you like, because it can be difficult to explain to consumers that these are tests that are on the cards. The tests aren't necessarily already being done or about to be done. So we don't want to scare consumers suddenly off or going and checking product labels and saying, oh no, we can't possibly use this anymore. That's why we really want to talk to the brands and those using suppliers, and encourage you guys as well to talk to the suppliers directly. That's the most important route at the moment.
Great, thank you. We also have a question about why we think that this issue hasn't made it more into the mainstream media. If there's a reason that it seems that industry publications have been reporting on it, but sort of not more widespread across the EU and the world.
I can take this one. I think actually, as you've seen a little bit earlier, there has been a lot of coverage about this issue, and it's actually a topic that media has taken very seriously. I think now the media has done somehow a part of their job, and now it's us brands that need to keep actually driving awareness around it. to get citizens to act and sign the ECI. So I do think that there has been coverage around it.
I'll just add, because we could take this a little bit into a couple of very key markets for cruelty-free cosmetics. So I think the North American US market is a very key market, as is the UK market. And in the UK, we have seen quite a lot of the big media papers actually pick this up, but it's in a bit of a crowded space at the moment. So what I'm not seeing is the big newspaper articles translate into the type of campaigning that we've seen in the past in the UK. And I think that's where we need to start to engage a little bit more in terms of a bit more activism. At the moment, the press articles have reported quite factually what is happening, but actually it's the move to putting some of the solutions on the table. But actually this one is now an interesting one, where we're really the animal protection organisations and the companies and even the trade associations are all speaking with one voice, and it's about trying to change government's positions. And that I don't think is something that we're necessarily going to do with too much media, but needs actually to open up open dialogue with the government authorities. Now, in the North America, there is more openness to doing that than there is at the moment in the EU and the UK. So I think it's using some actually of the environment that is become more embedded in terms of dialogue and multi-stakeholder discussions in North America, and trying to get that approach brought back into the EU and into the UK that will probably be the unlock for us.
Great, thank you so much. We also had a question about whether there is a deadline that the program will start removing the cruelty-free or animal test-free status from companies.
Yeah, I think I could take that one. There is not. We understand the very difficult position the companies are in, and we're devoted to sharing the truth with consumers. And how we will list companies who have faced this is still a little bit to be decided. And I say that only because I think it's so important for companies to push back against this. And that's the first step. And then we'll go from there. But we have information on our website right now about it. I think our supporters know what's coming up. And then we're going to have to take it on a case-by-case basis with each company.
Thank you, that sounds great. And we also have a question about how companies can convince people and their supporters and the general public that the raw materials they are using are totally safe and there's no need to test them on animals.
I'll take that one as the safety scientist on the team. I mean, we now have over 40 years worth of investment and experience in the non-animal approaches, and particularly over the last 20 years or so, very sophisticated approaches, which I would say and contest actually can give us better information to protect consumers and workers and the environment, because we can understand it at a much more detailed scientific level of how the chemical actually interacts with human biology or fish biology, etc. So as a toxicologist who started my career 30 years ago going, why do we do animal tests when we then add safety factors, because we can't really extrapolate the data between what we're seeing in an animal study and the human population? I now have a toolbox of many different assays which allow me to understand that at a scientific level, and then to use that data in terms of how we would protect consumers and the environment. So I'm very comfortable on the whole that we are making better safety decisions using the non-animal approaches. Now, you can get into situations where you have exhausted non-animal approaches and there would be no step forward. At that point, most companies should stop. Yeah, there is no justification for taking that next step and doing an animal study for cosmetic safety. So that would be my personal view on the answer to that question, Amanda.
Great, thank you. We also have a question about whether there is an estimate or a final number on how many ingredients will be tested in the EU under REACH in 2022, and whether natural and organic ingredients will also be tested.
I can take a start. That's a really difficult question to answer because, for one, the way in which REACH works, there's a couple of different processes under which ECHA might request tests, and it can happen under what we call a compliance check, where they're checking dossiers and thinking which tick box have they checked. And then there's another approach called substance evaluation, where they've actually identified potential chemicals of risk, and those are up for further discussion between member states to decide what potential next steps to take. And both of these processes can be incredibly timely and time consuming. So nothing is quick that we've found that comes out of ECHA in terms of test requests. So it's difficult to say how many or when. What we can say is that the Commission told us that there's around 150 cosmetics exclusive ingredients. We actually feel that number's higher than that because they've extrapolated their data. It's not a definite list. And we are aware that looking at cosmetics ingredients, and particularly with where certain test requirements may be heading in terms of certain test endpoints, such as endocrine disruptors that are likely to be on the hit list coming up in 2022, that it will increase. You know, I am fairly confident and fairly certain, unfortunately, that we're going to be seeing more and more coming through from ECHA, unless we can work to try and rectify this situation. And I do feel it's important to work with ECHA to look at how safety assurance is carried out, how they use data. But yeah, it's very difficult to try and put numbers and times on this.
So I'll just give a slightly positive bit, just so that there's some hope for us on that one. What I know is in some of those dossier checks where there have been letters requesting new animal testing, then actually the groups of companies, the consortia of companies involved, are essentially saying that they are going to adopt a no animal testing approach to fill those information gaps. Now, they're using what has come out of some of the European Court of Justice cases where PETA and others have been interveners as the legal backdrop for that. So it's very clear that there is an onus on all of us, even if ECHA asks for animal testing, that we adopt a principle of animal testing as a last resort. That is written in the EU legislation, and it's been re-emphasised by the various judges who have presided over these cases. What we sometimes find, though, is that in companies, in the legal departments, they aren't following what we've been doing in the external world, and they are not as familiar with some of the outcomes of these cases or the requirements on the companies. And so often you might need to start the discussion there with some of the suppliers if you find out that they're thinking of doing animal testing, which is just reminding them of the legal obligations, but also then where they can get help if they need it in relation to taking the non-animal approaches. So what we're trying to do is stop any testing that hasn't happened, and trying to get others to, to join us in doing that, because there will be much more impact from numbers of people, numbers of companies coming together and saying, no, we don't believe that this testing is going to add any value in terms of human health or environmental protection.
Great, thank you very much. We have another question about sort of the practical aspect of what happens when companies talk to their suppliers. So when the suppliers are challenging or refusing to do the animal tests, is the test only delayed, or is it possible for the ingredient to be approved without animal testing now, or will the test continue?
So we're in a situation where we would need to discuss the no animal testing approach with the authorities. And that's at the moment causing a bit of a challenge, because there's no mechanism for that dialogue to happen in Europe unlike in the US, where actually you can have that discussion quite openly, usually with the US EPA or other authorities. So we're working hard to open that one up. We're also working hard to make sure that there's some sort of independent referee, an independent scientific body that would look at those proposals, non-animal testing proposals, because at the moment we have a big gap between some of the companies and leading science that we've got, non-animal science, and actually the capability that resides within the European Chemicals Agency. Now, the Chemicals Agency are starting to address that, so there are some signs over the past few months of a bit of a change in direction, which we should all take heart from. But those are things that we can work on more from how Peter and some of the companies who are European based can actually try to influence how the whole sort of REACH testing starts to go. So I think the thing for the brands is more just understanding that bit with suppliers as to whether they are in a testing situation, what those ingredients might be, and really trying to convince the suppliers to stand up and say, no, we're not going to do animal testing.
Thanks very much. And we have one great last question about Brexit. Is there an update on the UK equivalent petition and debate in the UK Parliament?
So we are still trying to get discussions at the right level within the UK government. And I think that the response so far has been disappointing because there is a lack of understanding, I think, of some of the decisions that were taken in the past, which were policy decisions in the UK. So those discussions are still continuing. However, in the UK, we do have that mechanism for dialogue. And the regulatory body under REACH, which is the Health and Safety Executive, is very open to having discussions around animal testing and non-animal approaches, and really trying to uphold the animal testing as a last resort. And also the cosmetics regulator in the UK is very approachable and open to discussions on non-animal approaches. So I see the UK environment being one which is a little bit more behind in terms of some of the discussions, because they've got bigger Brexit related things on the plan, but actually you can see that we should be able to have those discussions that are needed in terms of no unnecessary animal testing and making sure that cosmetics ingredients are kept out of scope. But I think a lot will depend on the Simrise case. So that's the piece that I think, you know, every one of us are, you know, watching very closely to see how the ECJ case may be translated into the UK. So Julia, do you want to comment on your view there?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a concern, because we are aware that the UK government have said that they are looking at aligning with the same approach that ECHA are taking. But it's, as Julia says, I think there is the possibility of more open doors within the UK. Because part of it, because the UK haven't completely gotten off the ground yet with their testing or requests or anything like that. It's still a long process, ongoing, and a huge undertaking for them because of Brexit and setting up UK REACH. So although we have very significant concerns and worries, we do think that there is a campaign that is likely more easily to be able to be won through talking.
Great, thank you. And perfect timing, that was all of our questions.
Okay, well, I think we can wrap it up then. And I just encourage you all to be in touch with our Beauty Without Bunnies program. If you have specific questions, we'll do everything we can to help you, and we will keep you updated. So thank you so much for joining us.
Great, thanks everybody.